So the first time that I interacted with digital drawing software would have been, I would say Paint, Microsoft Paint. That would have been when I was in probably grade school. I loved using that line tool and you draw it all over the screen and then fill in all the colors with the paint bucket. The first time I used digital drawing with a pen tool would have been Photoshop with a Wacom tablet in college. Back then it was a pad and you draw and you look at the screen. And so there was this challenge of rewiring your brain to have it so you're drawing while you're looking away from the drawing. And once I got good at that, I used that pen versus a mouse just to control the computer. More than anything, digital drawing is a part of the asset creation of the work I make. So sometimes it's animation, sometimes it's illustration, but I'm usually creating a bunch of assets that I'm then feeding into particle systems or other things. But it certainly plays an early role in my conception when I'm sketching out ideas, storyboarding, planning, all that stuff. The top left one was the very first sketch of the idea. This idea of half of my face and then the other half is this like explosion of random references and creativity and all this other stuff that kind of flows out of the brain. For the environment, I wanted to create a funhouse type of feel that also played on my love of like the World's Fair. And so I wanted to be this kind of like retro carnival funhouse, and you go through this tight space, and then once you make it through that, you're in this big open pavilion that's modeled after the World's Fair. And so you can see some of those sketches are playing on this idea of like you going through that bag room and you're creating this kind of claustrophobia and then have this relief. Marble runs are a huge thing I find satisfying. I love watching marble videos, whether they're racing or going down tracks or whatever. It's one of my guilty pleasures. So I was like, well, I got to make a marble run. These balls are bouncing around. You see them hitting literal creative blocks. They're mixing and matching ideas. Each of these little circles represent an idea and the process it goes before it ends up back in your head and you regurgitate it into some new idea. I tried a lot of different ways to try and build. So I made like long drawings. I did some where I went into VR and I started like modeling the tracks in VR to get a sense of like how things would flow together and interact in different ways. And so there was a lot of kind of trying different ways of seeing which contraptions would play into each other. And this is the simplest version of it. And then I have other sketches that are much more complicated schematics. Cycle is a piece I made that's playing on this idea of the penguin toy that some of us grew up with, where there's these kind of penguins that go up the stairs and they slide down. For a long time, I was pondering this idea of it and how I could create a piece using it. You rise up when it goes well, and then everyone falls together, and then you hit a bottom and you start again. And so I wanted to kind of make my own interpretation of it using this toy. This sketch was done in Procreate. I then brought it into Photoshop and redrew the whole thing again, but with more pieces, more textures, more shadows, created grass that I drew in Photoshop as blades and then used particle systems to create a field of grass. It starts out with sketches and doodles and then you just build up the assets over and over and over.